What's up, YouTube? This is your friendly neighborhood movie nerd, here to update all of you on the annual movie news, reviews, and clues. So after Deadpool crushed it last weekend, both commercially and critically, I figured, why not do a top 10 list of my favorite superhero movies? So that's what I decided to do, since there's more than enough. So without further ado, I present to you my top 10 list of my favorite superhero movies of all time. And if you have a problem with one of them, tough luck, make your own, because guess what? This is my personal subjective list. So without further ado, here we go with my top 10 favorite superhero movies of all time. So coming in at number 10 is a movie that not a lot of people appreciated upon its initial release back in 2009, and that is Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Based off of the graphic novel written in 1986 by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, the movie focuses on a former group of vigilantes living in an alternate version of 1985 post the Cold War. And when one of their former members, the comedian, is murdered, the rest of them must get together in order to try and figure out who's gunning for them before the world collapses into World War III. I personally love this movie. I love the way that Zack Snyder interpreted this version of the comic, but I also understand why people don't really appreciate this movie, as it reaches an almost 3-hour runtime, and the fact that it delves so deeply into the individual character arcs, it can be a little bit confusing to follow. But I personally really appreciated it. It was, I thought, a very unique look at a superhero movie, and that's why it makes my number 10 Watchmen. So coming in at number 9 is a movie that was released prior to the superhero craze of the 2000s and the early 2010s. That would be Blade. Some wouldn't even technically consider this a superhero movie, so much more of a supernatural action movie, starring Wesley Snipes in his prime as the badass vampire-slaying Daywalker, as he was called by the vampires in that movie. This movie mixed a sleek black leather-bound look that The Matrix made cool at the end of the 90s with some kick-ass action and one-liners to create this pitch-perfect action movie that wasn't yet tied down to any existing properties in the late 90s, and that was Blade. So coming in at number 8 is none other than the movie that kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is the first Iron Man. This movie not only kicked off the highest grossing franchise currently today, but it also got Robert Downey Jr. back into the big leagues after a long battle with drug and alcohol addiction, as well as bringing some much needed credibility to director Jon Favreau, whose only directing credit to that point had been 2004's Elf. The movie was awesome. Robert was and still is the perfect person to play the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, because he's practically playing himself, and that's what makes this movie my number 8, the first Iron Man. Coming in at number 7 is the movie that was not the first to feature a superhero team, but the first to feature an all-star superhero team-up, and that is the First Avengers movie. Writer-director Joss Whedon had a tough job ahead of him, as he not only had to bring all of these huge characters together, but also had to give each one enough screen time, such as not to take away from the others. But he did, and boy was it awesome. This movie managed to bring the dysfunctional team together for one of the best final battles the cinematic world has ever seen, as well as giving us a superhero team that you actually rooted for, because they didn't really get along at first, but it was their journey towards becoming a working team that kept you invested the entire time. Not only that, but it was also the highest grossing opening weekend of all time, at least until this year, where 3 movies crushed it. Actually 4, and that would be Furious 7, the sequel, Avengers Age of Ultron, Jurassic World, and then of course Star Wars The Force Awakens. But hey, you can't win them all. So that's what makes my number 7 the first Avengers movie. So coming in at number 6 is a movie from the franchise that has had more ups and downs than probably any other superhero franchise, and that is X-Men Days of Future Past. Director Bryan Singer returned to helm the franchise that he had started, as he ultimately had to save it from such bad installments as X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. Luckily, he managed to send Hugh Jackman back in time to change the timeline in order to save both the franchise and the world, and give both a bright new future filled to the brim with more sequels. This movie not only managed to save the franchise by literally changing the timeline, but but it also brought back all the faces we'd come to know and love, both young and old, as well as incorporating some new faces and managing to make it all relevant to a movie that was already about time travel. So the fact that Singer was able to do all that and make the movie as great as it was only shows that he is the only person that is capable of helming this franchise, at least until Apocalypse shows up and destroys it all, and then someone else comes in, and hopefully he's able to still do as good a job as he was. So that is my number 6, X-Men Days of Future Past. Iron Man may have been the one to draw us into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Captain America is the guy who's kept us in the loop with my number 5 pick, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This poor soldier's first movie was simply an Avengers prequel, while it was basically made the least interesting part of the first Avengers. However, with Winter Soldier rolling around, the Captain finally got his chance to shine in a movie that was ultimately more of a spy thriller than a superhero movie, but that's what made it great. Not only was this another segment of Cap's story, but it was also easily the most influential Marvel movie since the Avengers, seeing the downfall of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as making Hydra an actual relevant part of the story again, and also introducing new characters, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, who would go on to have much larger parts in the MCU. The Russo brothers did such a good job directing this movie that not only they're coming back to do the sequel, but they've also taken Joss Whedon's place of directing both the Avengers sequels. And these are the guys who started off writing and directing episodes of Arrested Development and Community. So that's my number 5 pick, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So coming in at number 4 is basically Marvel's version of Star Wars, but there's nothing wrong with that, and that would be Guardians of the Galaxy. Taking place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but not tied to any of the existing storylines just yet. The movie focuses on a group of space criminals who are on the run from an intergalactic maniac who wants to destroy a planet. It sounds pretty run-of-the-mill, but the group chemistry and the kick-ass soundtrack make this movie anything but. This movie had the privilege of launching Parks and Rec supporting player Chris Pratt to superstardom, as well as turning a practically unknown Marvel team into one of the biggest hits of the summer of 2014. Mixed together with some of the best tunes of the 70s, and you've got yourself my number 4 spot, Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, so we're finally moving away from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and into my top 3, with my number 3 choice being The Incredibles. Now, this wouldn't be the first choice on a lot of people's minds when they think of a superhero movie, but it's a movie, albeit animated, about a superhero family. So that kind of makes it a superhero movie. Focusing on a superpowered family forced into hiding by a government lawsuit in response to the amount of property damage they've caused over the years, the family is brought back into action when a new threat emerges. Had this been covered by really any other animation studio, they could have just been an average run-of-the-mill superhero movie, but thanks to the fact that it was covered by the geniuses over at Pixar, this turned out not only to be one of the best animated superhero movies of all time, but also one of the best just movies of all time. This was such a good movie on itself because it focused not just on the superhero adventure, but more so on the family dynamics and how their normal lives were more so affected by them having superpowers than them being superheroes in hiding. Because they didn't start out as superheroes, only the parents were superheroes. The kids, they were just born with powers. They haven't been raised to become heroes the way that their parents were. So, great humor, great characters, a great story. It's just another fantastic Pixar installment and one of the best superhero movies of all time. That's my number 3 pick, The Incredibles. Coming in at number 2 is the most recent superhero movie release, and that would be Deadpool. Starting off as an action sequence that blew up the internet 3 years ago, director Tim Miller was eventually given the green light to direct his own feature-length Deadpool movie, and holy shit, was this movie awesome. From the opening credits alone, I knew that this movie was going to have all of the action, blood, cursing, dick jokes, chimichangas, and meta humor that me and all of the rest of the Deadpool fans of the world were denied with that shit sack X-Men Origins, where they sewed Deadpool's mouth shut. Luckily, this film managed to redeem that mistake, giving fans the Deadpool they all know and loved, as well as managing to give us one of the best and most relevant love stories we've ever gotten in a superhero movie. They also managed to incorporate this movie into the X-Men universe perfectly, with Colossus's Boy Scout persona clashing perfectly with Deadpool's badass, cursing, not giving a fuck persona. Can I just say that this version of Colossus was easily the best we've ever gotten, and also the version that actually got to say more than 2 sentences between the 3 movies that he had been in previously before this. But Ryan Reynolds finally got to play the role that he'd been petitioning to play for years, and really he kind of was the only person, the perfect person to play this, and he got to deliver, and us fans were finally able to rejoice that the Merc with the Mouth finally got his time to shine as hopefully Fox's new poster boy for my number 2 spot, Deadpool. we are. We've reached it. The #1 spot. The greatest superhero movie of all time. My personal favorite, and that of course is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze. Just kidding. Come on, guys. It's The Dark Knight. Really. Was there ever any doubt? Christopher Nolan managed to save Batman from the laughingstock that was Batman and Robin back in 1997 by giving him a new, gritty, and much darker look with 2005's Batman Begins. But then he managed to up the ante by not only giving us one of the best superhero sequels of all time, but also one of the few sequels that's better than the original. Christian Bale was back smoking a pack of cigarettes an hour to get his voice as deep as it needed to be, but it was ultimately in vain as he was easily outstripped by the groundbreaking, out-of-this-world final performance by Heath Ledger as Batman's arch-nemesis, the Joker, pulling us into a cat-and-mouse chase between the two forces of nature, with the Joker pushing Batman closer and closer to ultimately crossing the line that he refuses to cross. This movie pulls off the goal of not only making my #1 spot on this list, but also by easily being one of the best movies of the 2000s in general, and also the only movie to have ever scored an Academy Award for an actor in a superhero movie, with Heath Ledger scoring a posthumous Best Supporting Actor win in 2008 for this movie. So that is why this movie makes my #1 pick, The Dark Knight. So that's it. Those are my top 10. Those are my absolute favorites. Are there a few that I missed? Yeah, but those are from what I consider to be the best of all time. What did you guys think? Did you think that there needed to be a bit more on there? Did you think I should have made a top 20? Did you think that I was crazy for including Watchmen? Post your comments in the comments section below. And also, and as usual, follow me on Twitter at Movie Nerd, and also go to my website at movienerdreviews.com. That's it. I'll see you next time.